The session will be getting shortly, but let me give you just a couple of housekeeping details and things that you might need to know. Excuse me. You'll be getting an evaluation in your email. If we're on point, we might even have it in the chat towards the end, but you will be getting an email with a very, very short 2-minute evaluation. Your input is really important to us, so please take a moment and just fill that out as quickly as you can. And this session, excuse me, my voice is not awake yet, which is why I was never a really early morning DJ. The session is being recorded, and you'll be able to find that recording out on the Wisconsin Literacy Resources website, probably next week sometime once we get our hands on everything. If you have questions as we're going through today's program, I invite you to write them in the chat. Madison will be watching it. I will also try to watch it, and then Anne can take questions as she desires, and we can throw them all in at the end as well. So without any further ado, please let me introduce Anne Beeson. Anne is with New Readers Press, and she is an adult education specialist. She's worked with literacy and adult ed programs since 2001 and currently is working in 7 states. So just imagine how that has been during the pandemic. As an independent sales consultant, Anne offers resources for adult learners, primarily through New Readers Press, but I'll be honest, she knows a lot about what else is out there. And she has a master's degree in curriculum and instructional design from the University of Minnesota. So Anne, so glad that you're here. Take it away.
Oh, hi everyone. Like I said I did a presentation for Beth yesterday for Wisconsin Literacy, and I said, oh my God, I just miss you all in person. This being home is a bummer all day. So, all right, so we're going to go ahead and get started in this. The concept usually is, one of the things I'm not a huge fan of is let's do a sales presentation, because I'm just annoyed by it, and most of my customers are. So what I kind of thought I would do is talk about kind of some larger issues that and concepts that fit into what we're talking about, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of products, but I want to talk about before that, the research base for those products. So it probably makes a little bit more sense. And then how the products work, because nobody you all are, rocket scientists. So I don't need to say, this is a really good thing to buy. You don't need that. You can figure it out on your own. So let's go ahead and just get started. And I'll talk about what I want to talk about today. Let's see. Oh, isn't that funny? There we go. All right. So when we start talking about what we do for students, it's really important to sort of like revisit some of the most important features of what it is that we do every day. So, and I will probably say this till I drop dead, goals from the student are imperative. It's the most important thing you actually need for us to know about for the student. What is their goal, their educational goal? What do they want to be able to achieve by being with you? And then I want to talk a little bit about what we do as instructors and how that's sort of, the larger pieces that we need to just continue to revisit. And then I want to talk a little bit about the research base that New Readers Press has been using recently for products that they've been building, and they have ended up being very successful using this particular research for adult ed. And then I'm going to do a quick review on 2 products that have to do with the helping students increase their score in their TABE tests. So TABE Mastery and Scoreboost for TABE. Now, if you are considering or have moved to the CASAS, this information is still going to be relevant because it's the content and the structure of it is still applicable to that as well. I'll go a little bit on TABE, but we'll not worry about it. let's see. All right, so goals. What ends up happening a lot of times with tutors is they don't always get the information. Sometimes they, they say, oh, this person's going to need this, and here's the resource, and go for it. But I think it's really important that every teacher and every tutor knows what the student's goals are. Because once you have that information, you can better adjust everything that it is that you do, and to help them get where they have to go a lot faster if you're focused on what it is that they need. Let's see. I have to keep going over here. Sorry to change the page. So I found this great visual because I'm all about visuals. And I thought, this actually sort of explains the four main pieces that we need to consider when we're thinking about our students and what they need. So we start out with the standards. These are the requirements at different levels that have been identified by the federal folks, by the state folk, and in some cases, sometimes it's even at a local level. The curriculum, that's the resources you use to actually help get at those particular standards, how you do your instruction. And then finally, you have to have some kind of assessment to identify whether or not they've achieved those standards. So those are the ones these are the four pieces that we want to look at. So this one I put together, it's a little ugly, I'm sorry about that. But I wanted to try and put everything together so you kind of get a sense of where things fall. So there's no order here other than, I just sort of emulated that visual, which was cool. So I started out with standards. There's really, for Wisconsin, there's really three standards that sort of interlap and interlap for all the students here. So there's the National Reporting System, which actually divides down all the adult learners into 6 different levels, from literacy all the way up to our GED or high school equivalency level. The college and career readiness standards that come from the U.S. Department of Education, those standards are really were identified and part of the WIOA funding, that all the funded programs that use federal funds need to be able to follow those standards. And then, of course, the Wisconsin Technical College System has identified standards too. So the one thing that has not been done is a correlation of all of those standards. But I'd put money on the fact that if you put them all together and found out what do they have in common, I would say it's probably, at least the college and career readiness standards and the Wisconsin standards are probably about 80 to 90% similar, with some other additional things that the tech college system has identified. So then for curriculum, of course, I'm just putting the two pictures of the products that I'm going to talk about, but curriculum, covers everything that you use as a resource when you're instructing the students. So it could be the print material, it could be software programs, it could be any kind of resource that you're pulling in. Usually with curriculum, though, we want to be able to identify not just individual items, but an order of events to be able to achieve particular goals. So a curriculum is more of all of the items that come together rather than like this one book or this one software program. For instruction, what I am going to talk about a little bit here, because I just love this model, is this gradual release of responsibility framework. If you're not familiar with it, when you look at it, you'll immediately say, that's what I do. So there's nothing better than having research done and having someone do a model and have it be exactly what it is you do. But it's kind of a fresh way of kind of looking at things. And it also gives us all a reminder of what a really great way is to transfer responsibility from the teacher to the student. And then finally, for assessment, I've put up the information for the TABE and for the CASAS. So these are the two primary assessments that we use, but there's a wide variety of assessments that are interspersed within the curriculum and within your instruction. So that could be everything from a unit review at the end, or it could be a pre-test at the beginning of a software program, or a post-test in a book. Any one of those things are all assessments that either on a larger scale or a smaller scale want to identify, does this student understand this particular concept? So I'm going to focus just briefly on the TABE. This is going to be redundant for those of you that didn't do it, but I'm not going to do much of this because this information has been, we've talked about it for a long time. So I'm going to kind of just concentrate a little bit on the TABE because that's the primary one that most programs in Wisconsin tend to use. Of all the things that you need to be able to identify standards, because here's the important part about the TABE assessment. Because, okay, we're kind of going from the bottom and going to the top. The TABE assessment, like the CASAS, was approved by the NRS as an approved assessment to identify level changes. In order to get approved, their content and their assessment has to reflect what those standards are. So that's the thing that's really kind of important about using an assessment, whether that's the TABE or the CASAS, both of which have been approved by the NRS. And so if you want to be able to find out what those are fairly easily, I'm all about the TABE blueprints if you're using TABE. I just grab the top part of the blueprint because I'm all about the pie charts because they're easy to read. And it also gives you a good eyeball. So here we're looking, this is actually for level E, and it's for reading for 11 and 12. If you look at how the pie chart is set up, you can see right away that craft and structure and key ideas and details actually makes up close to 70% of what is being tested at the E level in reading. So knowing that without any other detail, you can tell right away, this is where you focus in your instruction to help your students move up the scale. And of course, why do we want to move up the scale? Because we're getting them to their goal. And, whether that's, getting a high school equivalency or getting to college or whatever it might be, this helps us get up to that goal. That's not to say you want to ignore the integration of knowledge and ideas and phonics and word recognition. That has to be part of it. Because, without phonics and word recognition, you're going to continue to struggle. So it is important for them to be able to really work on those as well. At the bottom, I put the website. And like I said, this is being recorded, but I'm just going to tell you now, you don't need the website. Just open up a browser and type in TABE 11 and 12 blueprint, and it will bring up every blueprint. And then finally, one other thing I wanted to say about this is just the top part of the document. Below that is a breakdown of each one of these pie segments of exactly what is included in there and the labeling of that particular item. So that'll actually give you some help as far as identifying what standards are there that the students need to be, dealing with. So if we talk about instruction, there is sometimes a lot of stuff you have to think about. You've got to think about, knowing the goals is knowing the learner, but you want to get more comfortable with them so they know you and you know them, and the comfort level will help with the instruction. You want to be able to assess them. So you want to know what level they are at. And, along the way, you want to be able to maybe do some assignments for some people. Other people may not need them and need other assignments. So you need to be flexible in that part. The other thing that's really kind of cool is your ability to build your questioning strategies. Okay, that's something you learn in sales, asking questions. And it's kind of funny. The one thing you don't want to do is ask those questions that are like have a yes or no answer, right? Uh-oh, that was a yes or no. Sorry. Okay. So those kinds of things actually help generate conversation in the classroom and really help everybody out. And then curriculum approaches, this is really how do you go about offering the material and what it is you're going to do. So during COVID, we have tried to figure out, and many places have, tried to do distance learning where they really have done very little or none before. So that's adjusting your curriculum because how you approach it is going to need different things. So let's take a look at this instructional model that I get all excited about. So this is called gradual release of responsibility. And the whole concept of this is to be able to take you as the instructor with the knowledge. So you're coming into class, you've done preparation, tutors too. You've done your preparation, you've looked at what the lessons are you want to do, you've reviewed a teacher guide if you've got access to that, you've come up with some different ideas, so you're all ready to go. You're the one with the knowledge, so you start out with having all that. And it's a process of moving to giving all of that learning responsibility into the hands of the student. So that's really the entire concept. This is what the model looks like. So I'll do a visual here, and then I've repeated it on the next slide, so we'll go into some more detail. But as you can see on the left-hand side, if you were to start on the left and work to the bottom right, working up and from the top to the bottom, you start up with that teacher, that teacher responsibility of the learning. So we call it I do it. So I, as the teacher, I'm doing the instruction, and you're doing focused instruction on a particular thing. The next thing you're going to do is guided instruction. So I'm going to use some examples for math later on, because that actually helps a little bit in doing this. But guided instruction is basically, we're going to walk through solving a problem together, you and I, you and the student. And then from there, we do collaborative learning, which actually is an upgrade of this model over the last couple of years, where they've added that collaborative learning. And wouldn't you know, it's a little problematic since COVID, because students have a really hard time sort of working together when they can't be together. So, breakout rooms help in doing that when you're doing Zoom instruction. But collaborative learning is the model where the students are working together on a particular thing, and the teachers are sort of, monitoring and offering advice and suggestions along the way. And then finally, independent learning, you do it alone. You want the student to be able to take that charge and be able to actually go through and do whatever the activity is. So I'm digging this model. It's just helpful. Here's just a basic, this is, breaking it down exactly what the different kind of instruction and learning is. What's important is that this model is not solid. You don't have to start with the upper left-hand corner and work to the bottom right. Here's an example. Let's say, for example, you've got a question you came up with that you want to ask everybody about a particular topic. So you could actually just start out your class by, you know what, we all have a question. I've got a question for you today, and I want all of you to write down your answer. So we're doing a couple different things. Here's the question, writing down the answer. The next step you might want to do is move to the collaborative learning and have the students talk to each other about what answer they gave to that particular that question. And then from there, we do a larger discussion, and then from there, we go to focused instruction at the top. So there's no, fast and hard rule on the order of events. Love that, because like every student, every teacher is different, and how they do things has to be flexible. And this model, I think, is really actually very good. So let's take a look at how this actually gets applied. So we want to actually, what's important, I think, when you're looking at different kind of curriculum, you want to be able to know that there is a good research base to that particular style of the product. So in this case, what I'm going to do is talk about these two items, these two curricula that we've that New Readers Press has developed, what they are and how they work, and also how does that gradual release of responsibility model fall into the style or the order of events in the directions in how the books actually work, or the material work. So I'll start with TABE Mastery to give you an idea. Hang on a second. I have to move you all. There we go. Okay. So I'll kind of go through some of the features of this book. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Hang on one second, because I think this is important. I'm going to go back to here. If you ask me what is, in like 5 seconds, the difference between these two products, I would say the one on the left is a core curriculum. Okay, this has the mother load of curriculum under the particular topics. Scoreboost for TABE is supplemental. It's a test prep product. Okay, so it helps the student really kind of boost up their confidence and their skills before post-testing. So just kind of, give you an idea of how that sort of functions. So let's go ahead and just skip on that. There we go. So when you look at TABE Mastery, they, basically what they did was they came up with 3 subject books at each one of the 4 levels. Now there isn't anything for the L level because that's an oral, I think, still. but they don't have an L level. So just E, M, D, and A. There's a reading, a language arts, and a math. Oh, FYI, TABE is building a writing test, like specific to writing. I started to hear this a while ago, and as soon as that information came out, New Readers Press started to work with Data Recognition Corporation to build books that are separate. Because one of the things my head was exploding is don't revise something, build something new, because to make everybody head explode, because I just bought this, I'm using it right now, it doesn't work. You know, I don't want to have to buy into something new. So they are going to do that. And then for each student book, there is an accompanying teacher guide. And I'll get into some of those details later, but I'll give you some more information on that. Each one of these lessons is scaffolded. There are practice questions throughout, and there is both diagnostic pre and post tests at the beginning and end of each book. So, you know, we always want to be able to have our adult learners be able to take a pretest, you know, because we want to eliminate what they don't know. However, there's something about over-testing students that kind of makes my head explode. So it is absolutely not necessary that a student take a pretest to use the TABE Mastery books. Because first of all, you've gone out and given them a TABE test recently. So to have them turn around and say, okay, now take this test, you know, you've got test results from that TABE test, and you can align that. And there's actually a free product at the end. I'll show you what it is. And I can also email it if you need it. That'll actually help you do that.
And we do have a question from Lois. Can you explain what the 11-12 reference is?
Oh, sure. So TABE, the TABE test has, they do a new version of it, kind of like there's a GED test for 2014. There was a 2002 test. So TABE 11 and 12 is the most current version. I'm thinking, someone's going to correct me on this, but I'm feeling like it was around 2016 that it came out, or 15, right around that time. There was a previous version called 9 and 10. The two numbers that they associate with the name is like version 1 and version 2. So you want to use 9 for a pretest, 10 as a post-test, 11 as a pretest, 12 as a post-test. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
And Jill was also wondering about the different letters in reference to the books and the guides.
Got it. Okay, so the E is, I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but E is the lowest and A is the most difficult level. So if you look at the TABE blueprints and the details, and actually there's some correlations on the New Readers Press website that will say, you know, students that are level E, you know, are at these particular reading levels. So it's pretty at a lower reading level. However, I lean on Jake from the Y all the time on this because he's a rocket scientist on the TABE, because he did so much beating up of it. And he was saying that, you know, because the first question was on those different levels, at which level are you like GED ready? You know, or close to GED ready. In previous versions, like 9 and 10, it was D. You know, you had to be right at or around the D level. But with this 11 and 12 version, A goes like way super high. So A is not even needed for doing GED, but it would be for students going into college. You know, they would need you to be able to be successful there. You might be able to start taking GED readies or practice for your GED in the high M or low D levels to mid D, you know, anytime in D. But level M even sometimes. And I know the results were kind of scary when we first started using this TABE test 11 and 12. There were just a lot of folks that really were showing really low gains. People that used to test at D started showing up at M. And people at M were showing up at E. And so everybody was kind of freaking out a little bit. But I think through time and utilization of this, I think people are getting a little bit more comfortable with that and the curriculum that's associated with it. And then scaffolded lessons, I also want to just identify that as, you know, a scaffolded lesson is the idea is Let's say you teach a particular item. So let's say it's adding fractions. And then the next thing you're going to do is multiplying fractions or subtracting fractions and working your way up. You can't teach these items, these discrete things by themselves. They build, especially in math, they build on one activity on the other. So you need to have the knowledge of working with fractions and decimals and percents before you can move up to working with pre-algebra and algebra. That kind of, you have to have the building blocks there. Same thing goes with reading. You know, if you are really still struggling with identifying the main idea, or if you're having a hard time, there's certain sight words you're having trouble with, those kind of issues need to be solved before you can move on. And there's, it's a whole deal just on, students learning to be able to read. So, and then I guess the final thing that I wanted to say about this particular slide is that these books were built specifically on the TABE 11-12 blueprint that I showed you earlier, which of course is built on the college and career readiness standards. So the thing that makes me feel good about it is that if it's all aligned, then it's kind of regardless whether or not you take the TABE test, although it's a little annoying if you're not going to take it, but the instruction in it is just really so good that it would actually be okay. And I would explain exactly to the students how that would work, what we're talking about, because having students be able to understand how learning works and instruction and learning gives them buy-in, and it makes them a colleague, which also keeps them connected with you. That's always a good idea. Individual books have particular features, and this is where you can kind of see the connection with the gradual release of responsibility model. So we're going to start out in each book with a pretest and a diagnostic chart. There's units and lessons underneath the units. Each unit is themed, so you'll be able to see that. I'm sorry, let me go back. The diagnostic chart, that's basically, it's a study plan based on your pretest. So it allows you to grade your pretest and identify what in the book you actually need to work on, because students may not have to work on the entire book, which would be a good thing. We go down into the lessons. I'm going to cover this a little bit because I've got actual pages so you can see visuals. Guided practice, independent practice, and TABE practice at the end. So you can kind of see it. The instruction part is at the themed units and the lessons. And then the guided instruction is going to be in the lessons as well, as you start giving examples of how to answer questions. And then you go into guided practice where you get more of that, and you're moving slowly into independent where I'm doing it on my own. And then we're assessing. So we're assessing at the beginning, assessing at the end. This model just makes a lot of sense. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to kind of go through this fairly quickly. These are just, okay, so I sat through a lot of New Readers Press, sales presentations on stuff, and they put an entire page on a slide. It makes my head explode every time I see it. So here's what I did. I took a little section of a page. So you could actually read this if you had to, okay? But I'm more about the visual of it, like what does it look like and how does that function for a student? So when you start a unit, the first thing we're gonna do, like any great essay, you're gonna tell them what you're gonna tell them, okay? So we know what the unit is, it's telling us what it is. Excuse me. And then right below here on the right, we're gonna talk about the topics that we're gonna tell you what we're gonna do some instruction on. We have some engaging photographs or some kind of visual right up front of the unit that usually ties the concept, whatever it is, to something either real life or work. Because we know that adult learners can learn so much easier if they're actually connected, in that if they're connected to something that they understand, it makes sense to them, they'll remember it. So that's kind of how the units all start. And then, hang on. And then when we go into a lesson, this is the beginning of every lesson is set up exactly the same way, regardless if it's math or language or reading, it doesn't matter. We start out and tell them what it is that they're learning. So we're understanding the base 10 system. Then we're identifying the learning goal. This is the small goal of a larger goal for the students. So it's important for the students to understand what this goal is and how it's connected to what they're trying to get at. And then you can learn the skill right below that. So that's the instructional part. That's I'm doing it for the student, or, the student is starting to learn it at the beginning, this is how we instruct it. There will always be vocabulary throughout all of this that the students needs to learn. So there's all kinds of ways to do that through the teacher guide. They'll tell you how to do that, but you'll always identify new vocabulary that will be in a particular lesson. And then a skills tip is always really one of those great pieces of information on this particular thing you need to know. And in this particular thing, it's defining what the base system is, the base 10 system. So it's identifying how that works. Once you go from doing the instruction part, then they give you 2 examples. I'm just showing one. And again, we're seeing another skills tip on the right-hand side, to give you more information. So if it's not making sense in the first example, always go to the skills tip. Either before, during, or after. Everything on the side is always something that's going to support you. And in this case, this is the walkthrough of how do you figure out the place value of a particular digit. By the way, I'm doing math because I'm super uncomfortable with it. I'm just saying, okay, I figure if I do it long enough, I won't be so anxious ridden, right? Okay, here's another example on here, but I did wanted to talk that, once you do a couple of examples after you've done the instruction, then you do the guided practice. So that's what follows it. So you can see it's, of course, following that same, gradual release of responsibility model. Think is always just one of those great ideas of things you need to know. So like in this case, it's saying estimates are useful when you don't need an exact answer, and then it gives you a little bit more information. So it sort of answers the questions of why am I learning this math idea, and think is actually oftentimes telling you what that is. And then check for errors. You see that more often in math than you do in reading and language, but checking for errors is a great thing because it helps you guide if you do have trouble, with answering particular questions. So that actually should help the students moving ahead. Then follows with independent practice. So here we've got sort of in the format of the TABE test. So we've got some questions and some answers, and you go through and do that. And by the way, all the answers, of course, are in the back of the book for the student. So once they go through this, they can check and see how they've done. And then a lesson review is at the very end, which is always a good idea to review what it is you've done. I even created a slide in this presentation for it. So yay. But go through and review. Here it is, it's like, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you just told them. And this is tell them what you just told them. This is the lesson review. So we can go through and see exactly what it is we've done. So it's reinforcing what we just did. And then the teacher guide, this one, like I said, sometimes they do teacher guides on free, online for free. They did that for Journey to Success, which was so cool. These are not, they're pretty intense. They're a lot more, there's so much more information in it, lesson plans, concepts and ideas. So to justify it, I'm going to just actually show you what that, some of the things that are in there. So it lays out all the goals. And it actually shows the goal as it is aligned to the standard. So you've got the standard number and the description of the standard that's in the teacher guide as well for every single item that you're doing instruction for. The other couple things that are really important when you're first starting to teach a particular area, regardless of how familiar you are with a content area, it's important to know what the prerequisite skills the students need before they learn this. So you don't want to throw somebody in algebra if they can't, do decimals yet or percents. You want to make sure that they have some prerequisite skills under their belt. And also sometimes it's good to have background information, just, more information, and it's for your reference that you can use with the instructors in class. So and then of course we're going to review what the vocabulary is and some ideas on how to do that. You're going to there's lesson plans having to do with learning the skill and the guided practice. There's all directions on helping you work with each one of these features that are in the student guide. Differentiated instruction, I love, because you know you're going to get students in the class who are going to be functioning below the level. And then, of course, you're going to get people that are functioning at a higher level. And then you've got ESL students that are in there that need some additional ESL support in there. So you'll always find that when you go through and see it. And then there's always additional work links that are in there. So how do you make the topic relevant so the student can actually remember it and think, aha, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to learn this. It's going to be good. So let's do some quick visuals on what it looks like. So it's laying out the information here. It's laying it out right up front. So this is the teacher guide for the same pages, you know, for the students that we just showed. So this is about understanding the base 10 system, and it's laying out again with the goals, because you want to have it all in your hands in one place, what standards they can be found in. Okay, so that will actually help. And then being able to see what the prerequisite skills. So before you do understanding the base 10 system, the students have to be able to count to 100, you know, and be fluent with addition facts, 9 plus 9, and then the related subtraction facts. You know, so these are all important. You need to know what these are before you do the instruction. And then background information. This is actually giving you everything from justification on why you're doing it and why it's important. And once you have this information, even though you already know it, sometimes it's helpful to actually see it written out, because it helps you maybe phrase it different, or, you know, or maybe like me, and it's math, I would live in this thing, you know, to be able to understand, to be able to, you know, teach my students these particular content areas. You know, I would lean heavily on this to be able to do it. So, and then it also gives, you know, lists again the vocabulary. And it, by the way, there's also a glossary in the very back of the teacher guide as well. And I think the student guide has it as well as that too. You talk about learning the skill and guided practice. So this is giving you some backup on when the students start working on these different areas, things you need to work on and be aware of when you're doing your instruction. And then the work link. You know, it just, to me, this is imperative, you know, is just answer the question, why am I learning this? You know, why am I learning this? So this is, you know, here's an example of how you can actually work on a particular item, you know, and tie it to something real life that actually makes sense. So, you know, we're buying markers and we're buying packages of 10. How do we figure this out? You know, how do we do the order? And then here's the differentiated instruction. So like on every lesson, you're going to find this as you go through. So if you've got someone in the class who's ESL that needs a little bit more support, you know, they could be at any variety of level that they're at, but having that ESL support there is really helpful. And then, you know, being able to work with a higher skilled student in the class and a lower level skill. You know, this part is not important when you're doing one-on-one, unless there's a particular issue that a tutor is looking for an idea, and you would find it here. Okay, I'm gonna just do Scoreboost pretty quickly. So is there any questions about TABE Mastery? Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to tell you this because Marcia doesn't know I'm going to say this. If there's something here that you want in your hands, you want to see a sample of one of these, you guys just email me. I'm Ann at adult@specialist.com. It's the beginning and the end of the slide. And I'm also on the New Readers Press website. Just find my rep. I can't send everything, but I can send a book or two of each series. So all you have to do is just email me and say, hey, can I see that? And don't ask for a teacher guide, because then I get in trouble, because they don't ask me to send those out, but student books all day. Okay. So whatever it is you want to see, I'm happy to do. And that includes both series. Okay. So Scoreboost for TABE, this is the supplemental resource. My gut reaction on this book, on this series of books, is that I tend to lean more towards using something like this in the 2 to 3 weeks before the student is going to post-test. Like, use it heavily then. And that's because it really is test prep oriented, and it gets the student pretty comfortable with answering questions. That's one idea. The other idea is sometimes a student's going to need reinforcement on a particular area, and Scoreboost might just do the trick. Where the TABE Mastery has really just about everything that is, tested on the TABE test, Scoreboost for TABE is not. It really actually focuses on particular strategies. So, and really it kind of focuses a little bit more to the larger pieces of the pie rather than the smaller ones, but it doesn't ignore the small ones. It's just that it's more of an emphasis on the larger pieces of the pie, because we want to be able to make sure that students are actually going to get through this test and show improvement, which is the result, of course, of your instruction. So there's a lot of pieces to the Scoreboost for TABE, and it kind of makes sense. But here's the simple part. There is a single reading book for all 4 levels. There's a language book for all 4 levels. For math, there's just so much math practice that's important. So all of the levels, except for this one I'm showing right here, have 3 math books. This one has 4. And then they come in variety packs, so one of each of every level, or a 10-pack on a title. So I always say, if you, first of all, ask for a sample and I'll send it to you. But lean a little bit more heavily on whatever it is you actually need, So here's what the idea is in Scoreboost. And this has actually worked super well for Scoreboost for the GED and Scoreboost for TABE, and we now have Scoreboost for CASAS as well. The concept is, and actually this came from a woman that I just love, and she's retired and it's killing me. It's Karen Van Slyke. And she worked for a number of different large publishing companies over her career, probably, 40 years or so, and then did a lot of independent stuff. She worked with New Readers Press at the end. And she's the one that came up with Scoreboost for GED. And the concept is, here's what we do. We're identifying the most important strategies that a student is going to need for a test. And then we identify what that is, and we do a quick description of what the strategy is. Then we give an example. Then we do the guided practice. Sound familiar? Independent practice. Then TABE practice, because eliminate the anxiety of what a test is formatted. How it's formatted with their questions. You do it so many times that when you actually take the test, it's like, I'm working on Scoreboost again. It's what it feels like. And then there's free resources that are associated with this. So there's a scope and sequence online at the New Readers Press under, they changed the website. So it may not say free resources, although there's a few of us that are screaming and saying changing the title back to free resources makes more sense than additional resources. So just so you know it's there, or email me and I can locate something as well. Scope and sequence is actually helpful. So here's a quick eyeball on what it looks like on the inside. So here's an example, and actually I pulled the same lesson that's associated with the TABE Mastery. So this is the understanding the base 10 system. There is a strategy here. And this is sort of a great review if a student needs this. So, you can actually go through and we're introducing what it looks like. And then let's go like this. So under under here, we see a number of things. So we see the guided practice and an additional part, and then think. So it's kind of like someone saying, I'm reading the guided question about 2010 census, and I'm going, I don't even know how to do this, and then here's the next thing that pops up is think. I need to look at the digit to the right of the thousands, which is the hundreds place. So it's kind of like a little, here you go. We're pushing you along, here you go. So that will actually help. And then here's the solution. Here's question 2, and it does the same thing. It sort of gives you that guided practice using the think model in this particular thing. And then in independent practice, it looks very similar. The difference is going to be is that you're going to see a lot more test tips pop up in Scoreboost than you do in TABE Mastery. So it's just going to have you start answering a lot of questions so you get very comfortable on your own, and then give you some tips along the way to be able to do that. And then my favorite part is there is an action plan after every assessment. And these actually is something that New Readers Press has been doing for a long time. I love these. They call them different things in different products, but they're always an action plan. So you grade what it is that you just did. So here's the, this tells you the directions on how to do it. And it helps you determine, do you have it mastered? And this is actually a small one. This is under a small little section. I'm covering, like page 73 to, I think it was like 80 or so. So it's really just saying, do we really kind of understand this thing? And you go through and do the action plan, see how you did, and it'll identify exactly whether or not you need to do more work or if you're good to go. Almost finally here, we're almost at the end. What am I doing? Psych, I'm way ahead of the game. Okay, online resources. This thing is so cool, and it is utterly 100% free. It's just a document that's on the New Readers Press website. Go under TABE 11 and 12, or TABE classes, I think is all together. This study guide it's kind of like an enhanced correlation. So if you've given someone a TABE test, and you've looked at their study plan, the kinds of things they need to work on, you can go directly to the TABE study guide at New Readers Press, and you can identify exactly what those items are on that study plan from TABE to New Readers Press materials and the page numbers, you can find it. Okay, so it just makes everything faster for you. It includes TABE Mastery, Scoreboost for TABE, and a bunch of other products that if you buy New Readers Press stuff, you probably already have it on your shelves that you're using. So everything from like Breakthrough to Math to, Journey to Success or Challenger, any one of these things, So what's good about it is that, so it's called a TABE study guide, but you should definitely look at it because, even if you are not interested in doing TABE materials, it's a great resource to identify what the standards are, where you can find them, and what books they're in. Correlations you can always work with GED. They always have all kinds of correlations that are there. But I'm just a huge fan of this TABE study guide because it's just easy to read and it's easy to follow. It'll help you when you're doing any kind of planning at all. Okay, ready for this? Let's review. Okay, I dated a guy who used to run around 1,000,000 miles an hour every single day when we would be out, and I'm like exhausted by the end of the day. At the end of the day, he'd always go, let's review. After a while, it just got funny. Okay, so let's review. Okay, goals. Know your students' goals, right? And then, always be aware of what they are so you can always justify what you're doing and helping them get where they need to go. Always think, revisit the standards, the curriculum and instructional and assessment that you're using for your students. You never need to change everything. Sometimes all you got to do is just do a little tweak here and there if things aren't working quite right. And then think about the gradual release of responsibility and focus on helping your students take control of their own learning. It's so helpful, and it makes them like your colleague. I said that before, but I feel like that's such a great way to work with adult learners. And then we ran through the two different products, the core curriculum that's TABE Mastery and the supplemental product, which is Scoreboost for TABE, and then talked a little bit about the free additional resources. And I think that is the point where we are putting up the slide that says questions.
Awesome. So I have Heidi's asking if I can send out a copy of the PowerPoint today.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I will. When it's done, I'll email that right to you, Madison. Is that okay?
Perfect. Yes, that works just fine. And also, if you have the link for that study guide, I would love to include that in the follow-up as well.
Let me do that together in the same email. So the TABE study guide.
Yeah, and is that study guide, is that on the New Readers Press site or on the TABE site?
It's on
or
the
maybe
New Readers,
both.
Yeah, the New Readers Press website. If maybe this will just be helpful because it's a reminder. So why don't I'll send the TABE study guide, the link, and I think I might have the document here, so I can just attach it and send it, and I'll do the PowerPoint. And I will give you the link for the TABE blueprints because I think it's a good read. Seriously, you guys, as soon as you go to it, if you haven't gone to it in a while or if you've never gone to it, it's totally worth doing it because it's so easy to read and understand. And I think this might be helpful too. I know that New Readers Press is building the TABE Mastery into an online course. I don't know what the deadline is on that. We're working with Bench Prep, which is the company that handles our New Readers Press online learning, pre-HSC and GED courses. So it's going to go on that platform, but I think it's going to be a little bit different on how that functions. So there is something like that they're working on right now.
We have another question from Nancy, and she asks, is the GED test based on the same standards as the TABE?
Yes. Yeah, wouldn't that be insane if it wasn't? I think everybody's head would explode for sure. No, it's all focused on, I look at the NRS levels as big, gigantic buckets, so 1 through 6, 6 being the highest level, 1 being the lowest. And it's like each level is like it is like 2 reading levels, you would call it, I guess, like literacy to 2 is the lowest, and work your way up. But it's the college career readiness standards that really are driving everything. And that, of course, is being driven because it was developed in conjunction with the WIOA funding, which is where all the adult ed federal funding is coming from. So that's the control mechanism. And frankly, the upside of that is publishers, all of them, if they're smart, are building new materials and they're incorporating all kinds of work examples when they're doing their materials, and really concentrating on that kind of stuff because the funding is coming from, from that end of it, from the workforce end of it.
And I will say, though, that I do get feedback from some of our tutors who are using the TABE Mastery that they're encountering some concepts and some vocabulary that we don't see reflected anywhere in our GED material. And so all of a sudden they're hit with this like, wow, I've been doing GED stuff, with the 2014 regimen stuff, but like I haven't come across this at all.
Right.
And
okay. So there are 2 completely different tests. The TABE and the GED. The GED was developed from a subset of materials from the College and Career Readiness Standards. The TABE will have a lot of material that also comes from there, but it doesn't mean that both tests cover all information. There's most likely more information, more items that you are covering taking the TABE test than you would in the GED. Mm-hmm. So it's, you couldn't really take a TABE test and say, oh, if they hit mid, if they're in the M level and the high end of M level, I'm going to have them just go take a GED test. No, I wouldn't do that. But I think that, you were going to see a wider variety of material being tested in a TABE test that, of course, would be reflected in TABE Mastery, but would not be reflected in a GED product. Mm-hmm. Just because there's not as, so it's just that what you're saying is exactly correct. They would be running into TABE Mastery material that would not be on the GED test.
So for the purposes of the goals of those students who are working towards GED,
sure,
then it might even be advisable to weed out some of that outlier stuff that maybe TABE looks at, but in terms of the ultimate goal of the student, which is GED preparation, it's not really relevant. It's not reflected in that.
Correct. And frankly, if somebody is really at that level where you give them a GED ready and they are in good shape, yet they need to do some brushing up, but they're at that level, you should definitely be using GED material, rather than TABE Mastery or other things, whether that's a Kaplan book, whether that's New Readers Press stuff, whether it's any publisher or software program for GED, because those products really are focused on that particular test.
Right. We tend to use the TABE stuff to kind of ramp somebody up to the GED stuff.
Sure.
Kind of like the way that like the old Achieving Success with TABE stuff might be used in a way to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So a follow-up question. I'm sorry, then I'll step back so somebody else can ask a question.
We got 3 minutes. We're good.
The study guide. Okay, use it wisely. That study guide, does that actually then provide, and I may have misunderstood, but in there, does that provide a direct correlation or sort of a diagnostic prescription from what somebody does on an actual TABE test to these resources?
No. Okay. So what the TABE study guide does is, let's say you've given a TABE test to a student and you have the study plan. It shows you what it is that they need to work on. And it'll show you, you know, it says these are areas where they did well, these are areas they need more work on. What I would do is I would go to the things that I need more work on from that TABE study plan that comes out of taking a TABE test. Then you go to the TABE study guide by New Readers Press, and I say, okay, the problem is polynomials. I can't believe I just said that out loud. And you could take that idea and then you could say there's an outline in the TABE study guide. It'll actually be exactly the same title if we have it in some kind of resource, and it'll tell you what New Readers Press resource you can find instruction in it or practice on that area. So it's a way of saying, of making a connection from here to here by saying, I have the results, they need to work on this, this, and this. I take those titles, what they label them as, you go to the TABE study guide, the same labels are there, and then it'll say, go to pre-HSE core skills math, pages 27 through 29. Or go to, social studies for the GED test, the section on geography. There's whatever it might be. So that'll actually give you, and the thing that I like about it is that, some of these materials, a lot of you guys already have, so you'll just be able to see it right away.
And so the TABE study plan, is that just come out of the computer version of TABE or the online version of TABE, or is there a hard copy of that as well?
Of the TABE study plan? Or
the
study
TABE
guide?
study plan, which you could do or formulate directly out of an individual's TABE.
You know what? That area. I am not an area that's not my area of expertise. There might be somebody here that is really familiar with the online TABE and the paper TABE and what comes out of that. But my understanding is that there is, from the online one for sure, there's a report. It's kind of in a way similar to, taking a GED Ready and getting a study plan out of it.
Right. I mean, we're currently giving the hard copy version though, and so I guess what I'm wondering is there a hard copy, that we could use in the same sort of way?
Well, this document that's on the website, the TABE study guide that is done by New Readers Press, is a PDF file, so you can just print it. It's free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If anyone else has questions, feel free to unmute yourself.
The other thing I was going to add is Literacy Services now does have access to online TABE. You might want to check in with Aaron. That was one of the things Wisconsin Literacy set up for a lot of the agencies. And having given both kinds of tests, the paper and the online version gives you so much more.